Okay, if you will bow with me, we'll have an opening prayer. Dear Holy God, we thank you for this Sabbath day. We thank you for your many mercies and goodness towards us. We ask for your presence to teach us, to help us to understand things, that we would become stronger, radical feminists. We pray this in Jesus' name. Amen. Okay, so the title is Beauty Standards and Patriarchy. As I was putting this together, it is a huge subject. I have to admit, I was overwhelmed at the tentacles, the far-reachingness, the global aspect of this, the cultural. So I had to really pull it in, and I hope it's clear. It's certainly not a full, concise study. It's just too big to do in one study. So I'm trying to just hit specific areas. So I guess what I had in mind during the study preparing was, what are feminine beauty standards? Who decides the standards? How are girls and women affected by these standards? And is the patriarchy connected? So there's a lot of definitions of beauty standards in the dictionaries, but I found one in an article that fits pretty well that I'd like to use. And this is how they wrote it. Beauty standards are the individual qualifications women and girls are expected to meet. Why? In order to embody the feminine beauty ideal. And thus, they will succeed personally and professionally. So the terms in this definition, women and feminine, are used here because the beauty industry is definitely built on binary, male, female. And it's a foundation that props up the patriarchy and negatively impacts women, men, and non-binary people alike. So where do we see these qualifications? They're everywhere. We are inundated in our culture. We have grown up since we were young women, young girls, and grown into young women, that we are constantly communicated to us through film, magazines, advertisements, literature, the school system, the medical system, politics, personal relationships, social media, the law, and of course, multi-billion-dollar advertising. And it works. Otherwise, they would not spend that kind of money. So these feminine ideals is a specific beauty standard, and it's ingrained in all of our lives. It's to increase in young girls and women their perceived physical attractiveness. And as you will see and probably already understand, this phenomenon is experienced by women around the world because every culture has it. Every country has a standard. These standards actually give a false hope of having the perfect body, having the feminine body that
Okay, she's reconnecting. Okay. Just waiting for her sound. She may have to go back out again.
I just noticed that it shows you're recording to the cloud.
Yes.
I don't know if that makes a difference. Oh, okay.
are we back?
Okay, she's back. No, she's having difficulties. But I think that's...
Did I try and use my cell phone instead of the, I don't know why. I've got good internet connection, but obviously it's not good enough.
Yeah, and sometimes there is problem. So you're on your phone right now? Or
No,
you're, okay,
no, I'm on my computer, but
okay,
if it messes up again, I'll try using the phone instead. It'll just be challenged. I'll take a photo of the board when
okay,
it comes time to get to that.
okay.
Okay, where did I get lost? Listing all the standards,
Yeah, you went that
body weight.
through the world. You just started. You were talking about that it was everywhere. It was in the world, all the cultures. And then you,
Okay. Okay, so then I went to I listed the different traits that are expected. The beauty ideal traits, female body shape, facial features, skin tones, height. Like you can do anything with that, right? Clothing style, hairstyle, body weight. And of course, a lot of women who feel pressured choose to undergo facial and body altering practices that can be very quite severe. Some of the practices actually include skin bleaching, foot binding, neck rings, hair removal, makeup, wig installations, teeth lacquering, tanning, wearing corsets, etc., etc. It never ends. And it is an international obsession. And of course, because it's international, there is no one beauty standard. Each culture sets its own. And so, but there is a tendency, as you will see later, that Europe and the Western countries have a big influence on other countries around the world. And those beauty standards have creeped over into other countries. So I wanted to look at the beauty industry. There was an author who wrote a book called War Paint, and she documents cosmetics entrepreneur Helena Rubinstein. And she was the first woman in the 1900s to classify skin condition as dry, normal, or oily. And this was in the 1900s. And she used those classifications of skin to sell her cream, Velaz. And it was then that women started to feel the normal functions of their skin, like blemishes and wrinkles, the production of oil, the existence of dead skin cells, was somehow wrong, and that buying the creams would put it right. So that's in the 1900s. And there is advertising prior to that that were also pressuring women for different beauty standards. But again, this subject is huge. So today's topical hair cream regimen was not prescribed by health experts, but by a man who was marketing for L'Oreal hair products. The shampoo was introduced in 1938 in the United States. And, oh no, not the United States, France, sorry. And he wanted to get the people of France, 43 million people in France, to wash their hair once a week. And it would increase their bottom line. And he says, tell people they're disgusting. They don't smell good and they're not attractive, but do it subtly. So psychological manipulation is the foundation upon which the beauty industry is built. The method not only increases the selling of products, but it's also ideal for maintaining the patriarchy, because women are seen as mere beauties in men's culture, and then that culture can be kept male. And this was written, that comment was written by Naomi Wolf in her book called The Beauty Myth. And she argues that beauty standards are used as political weapons against women's advancement. And it was a response to that political weapon where it was a violent backlash against feminism, and it draws a parallel to the feminism movements of the 1960s and 70s, when there was an increased policing of women's looks. And as we know, we've seen from Elder Test's couple of studies, feminists were stereotyped as ugly, old maids, angry women. And it was an effort to undermine the message of equality. The number of diet-related articles in women's magazines rose 70% from 1968 to 1972, right at the beginning and the height of the women's second wave feminism. In 1975, Xerox withdrew a job offer based on a woman's weight. And of course, the airline industry was the same way. In fact, women were hired temporarily because they always wanted a fresh staff of young women who were thin and wrinkle-free and met their hostess standards for all the males that were flying, because the women were, of course, at home with the children. So through the 60s and 70s, courts consistently upheld the right of employers to enforce appearance-based policies on female employees. Politically, psychologically, and legally, the message was clear. Women were only as valuable as they were beautiful, both in the world and in the workplace. This is so big. This is, I mean, we have, what was that court? The court case in 1989, Price Waterhouse versus Hopkins. And it was about a non-conforming woman fighting beauty standards discrimination. So, and also in the 1970s, L'Oreal came out with a new slogan. Maybe many of you who are old enough will remember. It was advertising some kind of product. And of course, at the end of it, the woman would look into the camera and say, "Because I'm worth it." And that was in the 1970s. So again, it went from, this was, of course, during when women were demanding equality, and they shifted the marketing from having your, you need to perform the beauty for others, to wanting to do the beauty for yourself. It's your choice, which we know is liberal feminism. So one of the people who worked in the beauty industry says, we have gone from a culture that reminds you that your body is being looked at, to you being the most consistent surveyor of your own body. And a writer named Glennon Doyle puts it, quote, "A very effective way to control women is to convince women to control themselves." This message of self-empowerment continues to evolve alongside the feminist movement today. And I'm sure you've seen many of the YouTube things. What's her name? Beyonce standing in front of the word feminist, and all the other advertising and justifications by liberal feminism. Interestingly, empowerment marketing still preys upon insecurities. Corporations can only empower consumers with products if consumers are disempowered in the first place. So I know, growing up in the 60s as a young girl, I was so absorbed with my body not being what I thought was the ideal at a young age. And even at 13, I was unhappy at how tall I was because the boys hadn't had their growth spurt yet. I wanted to be, petite, 5'2". And at that time I was 5'6" already. And I was just so disheartened, and I knew there was nothing I could do about the height thing. So it was a constant, never feeling secure with my own self, in my own body. And it carried on for a long, long time. And it's still a battle for, I know, many women, that we get these involuntary, I would call them attacks on how we look, how we feel. We need to lose weight. Oh, your eyebrows aren't right. All of that from a third party view, which is just preying on these things that have been ingrained in us from our childhood.
Kathy,
Yes.
I just wanted to mention, in the 60s, there were also, in the 70s, I know that you look at Karen Carpenter, I mean, she died of anorexia.
Yes.
I have 4 sisters, and one of my sisters, she wasn't really bigger, but she was just more fleshy than the rest of my sisters. And she ended up for a couple of years suffering terribly from bulimia, and had to have, she was hospitalized from it as well, and had to seek counseling and all this stuff because of all this stuff that you're talking about. She's bringing up a whole bunch of other ideas here.
Mm-hmm. I have some statistics later on that I'll read. It's just mind-boggling. I never really realized how strong and how powerful this whole thing is on women around the world and the psyche. And it was just mind-boggling. And there was this, let me see what I found here. I lost it. Okay, so back in 2004, Dove soap did a advertising campaign. It's called Campaign for Real Beauty, which featured real women instead of models. Now, over the years, the series was praised by the beauty media and consumers for rebelling against beauty standards. However, the product was an ad for a skin firming cream that claimed to reduce the appearance of cellulite. So, you know what I mean? It was kind of like a play on people. Yes, we're going to use regular people, but oh, by the way, even regular people have cellulite, so we're going to get them to buy it too. And of course, it is natural, it's normal, it's impossible to get rid of, but we've been conditioned to change our bodies, to lighten or darken our skin, to alter our hair color and hair texture, to attempt to slow and stop the aging process, or even try and reverse it. Remove fat from our stomachs and arms and add it to our breasts and our buttocks. Remove the hair from our legs and our armpits and glue it to our eyelashes and tattoo it on our eyebrows. The things that we have come to idealize are physical impossibilities, time and money consuming, and the pursuit of them never ends. And that is the purpose of the beauty industry, to sell products, bottom line. One last comment about the beauty standard is the chemicals that are in those products that are killing women. The slavery that's involved in mining from third world countries, the silica and different things that go into the makeup that make women, quote, glow or shimmer, child labor, women slavery used in horrible working conditions. And that's a whole nother study in of itself. So as a young girl born in the 50s, and I had a Barbie in the 60s. And boy, did she put a lot of pressure on us. And I did find a chart that shows the Barbie's measurements compared to a normal human being. And Barbie actually is very anorexic. So her head is 22 inches. A normal head is 20 inches. Her neck is only 9 inches, where the average neck is 15 inches. Her bust is 32, average is 35. Her biceps are 7 inches. Biceps are normally 13 inches. Her forearms are 6 inches. The average is 11. Her wrist is 3.5 inches. The average is 6.5. Her waist is 16 inches. The average is 35. Her hips are 29 inches. The average is 40. Her thighs are 16 inches. The average is 25. Calf 11 inches. Average is 16. And her ankles are 6 inches. And the average is 9 inches. The person who compiled this these proportions said that if she were a human being, she would not be able to walk. She would have to walk on all fours. Her body physically could not support her with these dimensions. So the global beauty industry is $382 billion a year, and it touches all aspects of appearance. It's built not only on the promises for attractiveness, but it also plays on the fears of ugliness. And that is very, very powerful, as we have seen. It was a method used against feminists who were fighting for equal rights. They make huge profits. One study shows that 53% of American 13-year-old girls are unhappy with their bodies. And by the time those girls reach 17, this number grows to 78%. These feelings of self-worth can be tied to lower rates of confidence at school and work. They are a direct result of the constant, targeted messaging that surrounds appearance, beauty, and perfection. Another recent survey of 3,300 girls and women across 10 countries, 90% of all women aged 15 to 64 worldwide want to change at least one aspect of their physical appearance, with body weight ranking the highest. This finding suggests that women's anxiety about their appearance is a global phenomenon. It's observed in every country studied, from Saudi Arabia to the United States. Beyond body dissatisfaction, a stunning 67% of all women 15 to 64 worldwide reported that they actually withdrew from life-engaging, life-sustaining activities due to feeling badly about their looks. These activities include giving an opinion, meeting friends, exercising, going to work, going to school, dating, and even going to the doctor. That's remarkable. That is remarkable. I mean, talk about a dictator. Talk about authoritarian. Beauty standards are right there. So with the influence of fairy tales, mass media, advertisements, fashion, beauty-centered dolls such as Barbie, female characters in movies and fairy tales. It adds to the pressure to conform to the feminine beauty ideal starting from a young age. What are little girls told? And I am guilty of this. Oh, you look so pretty. Look how pretty you are. Look at that pretty dress. Oh, your hair is so pretty. What is the message that we're getting and we're giving? It has nothing to do with their humanity as a person and their character traits. It's all about beauty. And little boys are, of course, told you how strong you are and how fast you are. But the ingraining of women begins at a young age. And we seem to have this, I even catch myself, oh, your hair looks really good. Oh, you know what I mean? It's like after I say it, I'm like, oh, geez, that's not needed, right? So this pressure, this thing is so ingrained in us, it just takes a lot of time to get it out. Now, beauty standards, of course, change continuously over time, and they are becoming even harder to achieve. Now, many of the reasons for these changes are exclusively culture, while others are based on just trends and fad of the moment. What are the psychological effects? Depression, eating disorders, body dysmorphia, and low self-esteem. This starts from adolescence and into adulthood. Beauty standards also reflect aspects of women's identity, such as age and race. As women grow older, products shift from promising anti-aging solutions that seem to be able to stop time itself. Aging is now deemed as a failure in effectively combating wrinkles and fine lines, rather than a natural inevitability. I can tell you that's true. There is so much pressure as you age. Coloring the hair, facelifts, fighting the wrinkles, everybody different, different high school friends of mine have taken different routes. Some have gone natural and, just going with the aging process. Others still look like they did when we were 18. For women of color, especially Black women, the entire industry is structured to imagine the default consumer as white. Black women are underrepresented in modeling and beauty campaigns, and cheaper mainstream brands provide a much more limited range of darker shades. So the pressure is there for women of color, but they're not given the choices of things. There's discrimination within the beauty industry for women of color. But they're still under the same pressure. So one thing I came across, which I had never heard of before, but I intuitively knew about it growing up as a young woman. I don't know if you've heard anything, it's called the male gaze. It's the representation of women in media, especially movies and cinema, that is adapted to suit a male audience. Very similar to the paintings of old that were painted by men for men. So this cinematic concept was introduced in 1975, and it's described as a heterosexual masculine gaze of women who are characterized by their, quote, to be looked at-ness, I mean, they are there to be looked at specifically, and it's for the male gaze, and they are positioned specifically in the movie or in the cinema, or whatever that method is, for the male gaze. So the woman is the spectacle and the man is the bearer of the look. And the women are visually positioned as an object of the heterosexual male gaze. The male gaze has become familiar. In our cultural perspective, many women are probably familiar with catcalls by construction workers or truckers or men, hoots and hollers, being stared at certain body parts, unsolicited comments or touching. This is the male gaze. I even one time, a complete stranger in the grocery store, a man felt it was okay to come up to me in the grocery store and make a comment about a body part, one of my body parts. And and I was still, I think I was still in my early 40s. And what was so crazy when I look at it now, I thought it was a compliment. I didn't even understand what we know now regarding sexism, patriarchy, the male gaze. And now I think I would have a comment to give back to him if that ever happened again. So these media representations and direct experience, both women and girls learn that their appearance is social currency, and they begin to take the male gazer perspective. It's a psychological thing. It's a process of habitual body monitoring, wherein women monitor their bodies as they believe the outside observers are seeing. And it's called self-objectification. So over time, women then pay more attention to their appearance. They internalize the observer view of their bodies. And now they place a greater value on how they look and not how they feel. This is what we have been ingrained with growing up through media. So there's a feminist named Naomi Wolf. She wrote a book in 1991 called The Beauty Myth. And she said beauty as an objective and universal entity does not exist. Quote, beauty is a currency system like the gold standard. Like any economy, it is determined by politics. And in the modern age, in the West, it is the last, best belief system that keeps male dominance intact. That's a pretty powerful statement. Anybody have any comments on that? Do you agree with her?
Yeah, can you repeat that? That was
Yes.
a lot, needs to sink in.
So her quote is, beauty is a currency like the gold standard. Like any economy, it is determined by politics. And in the modern age, in the West, it is the last and best belief system that keeps male dominance intact. According to Wolf, the images we see around us are based on myth. Their beauty is like the tales of Aphrodite. Beauty is a convenient fiction used by multi-billion-dollar industries that create image of beauty and peddle them as opium for the female masses. Beauty ushers women to a place where men want them, out of the power structure. Capitalism and patriarchy define beauty for cultural consumption and plaster images of beauty everywhere to stir up envy and desire. And their covetousness, the covetousness they inspire, serves their twin goals, making money and preserving the status quo. Pretty powerful stuff. Yeah, and it was written in 1991.
Yeah.
And so we had 1989 with Price Waterhouse, 1991, this feminist book came out. She continues to say that psychological manipulation is the foundation upon which beauty marketing is built. This method isn't only ideal for selling products, it's also ideal for maintaining the patriarchy. So I have a timeline, which I will take a photograph and send on the threads afterwards. It's not a comprehensive beauty timeline. I can't remember my source for it, but it gives a good overview. So one of the things is what we'll see is a fluctuation between exaggerated feminine forms and the rejection of those heteronormative feminine ideals. Now, I looked up that word heteronormative because I didn't know what it meant. I thought I did, but I was wrong. So let me give you the definition. So heteronormative, I'll put it on the board. HETERONOR. Heteronormative. The concept that heterosexuality is the preferred or normal mode of sexual orientation. It assumes the gender binary, that there are only two distinct opposite genders, and that sexual and marital relations are most fitting between people of opposite sex. A heteronormative view, therefore, involves alignment of biological sex, sexuality, gender, and gender identity and gender roles. So, of course, this is all about cisgender. So, in 700 BC in ancient Greece, the beauty standards at the time were symmetry, perfect proportions, and curves. From 1400 to 1600 in Northern Europe during the Renaissance, it was voluptuous curves, pale hair, and ivory skin. Now again, who are the artists? Who are the sculptors during these times? It's
Men.
not women, right?
Right.
They're creating the standard with their artwork. 1837 to 1901 in England during the Victorian era, the cinched waist, exaggerated curves, which I'm thinking that means like the bustle at the back, or maybe the hip skirt, the hoop that makes the hips go out, and then, of course, white skin. Then in the 1920s, USA, we have the Roaring Twenties. This is during the time of women gaining the vote. And here is the rejection of all those previous standards. It's a flat chest, And it's a quote boyish flapper silhouette. And they cut their hair, and it's called a bob haircut. So they're showing the rejection here. 1930s to 1940, Hollywood, the golden age, leggy, long-legged women, and they were toned, and they had platinum blonde hair. Think of Marilyn Monroe. Or she's in the next one. Who's platinum blonde in that era? I don't remember. 1950, called the Fabulous 50s, the hourglass figure. Peaches and cream complexion. I remember watching Father Knows Best. The wife was always in these dresses that cinched at the waist and came out. She had the hourglass. She had pearls, high heels, and she would vacuum during the day while father was at work and the children were at school. Leave It to Beaver, same thing. Joan Cleaver, always dressed to the nines to clean house. And she always had the trim figure. I even remember, I have pictures of my mother dressed that same way. 1960s and 80s, swinging 60s and 70s, it's called. The Twiggy phenomenon came from England, and she was skinny, very thin. They had lots of makeup and then big hair. I forget why I have 1970 there. Okay, 1980 USA supermodel era, tall material girl. Okay, so we're still being, the word girl is still being used for women. Bigger hair, more makeup. 1990 World Wide Web USA, heroin chick, bone protrusions. They actually looked ill. So they were protesting and rejecting the material girl, and now they're showing this really unhealthy looking body image. 2000 USA, exaggerated curves, big buttocks, plump lips, fake eyelashes. So in 1989 was Price Waterhouse. 1970. What happened in 1970? I can't remember. Okay, 2022. I don't know if you saw in the news, but a young woman in England. It was the Miss England pageant. She won, and she didn't wear makeup. She was the very first person to do this. And there's a no makeup movement, which actually started back in 2016. Interesting though, she still does fake nails and heels and fashion, but she's, went in there and competed without any makeup, which was stunning for that type of competition. And of course, we have social media with filters and Photoshops. I don't know if you've ever seen any of those YouTube. I guess they're kind of little mini documentaries, but they show how these filters, people are using them to change their nose, their color of their skin, and they get this perfect face. And it's not them, it's not even real. And it's stunning. It makes it difficult for people to know real from fake if you don't know that those software capabilities are there. Okay. I'm really sorry. I don't know why this is happening. I think I'm going to try and keep the camera off for a little bit, see if that helps.
Okay.
Okay, so I was saying, I think that the 20s, 60s, and 70s were rejection of the beauty construct. The assumption that women are heterosexual and desiring only the attention of cisgender men. The 20s were characterized by the androgynous look for women. They would flatten their chests with constricting bras, wear loose clothing that hid their curves, and chop their hair. And of course, this is when they were gaining the right to vote during the suffrage movement. During the 60s and 70s, they again rejected the beauty construct. They shifted away from corsets and pinup girls from the prior years. And this coincided with second wave women's feminist rights. So women still fight against the standards, but the standards still exist. And it's a battle to stay out of that box that culture has determined what you were to look like. Social media is constantly showing who's beautiful in the culture and which bodies are to be exalted over others. The timeline we looked at shows that women actually have to work to transform their body to meet the beauty standards. It's like, you know, you're ever trying but never attaining because it's always shifting. I remember in high school, I was in a conservative area of Maryland, countryside, and I think I was in my junior year. And I started sewing my own clothes, and they were like really different and radical. They weren't the classic wool skirt with a wool sweater and penny loafers. I was finding some of the most ugly shoes you could wear, and I loved them. My mother had a fit. But I was on my way, you know, to breaking out of those things. And then at 18, I got married and fell right back into it. So also the timeline showed that the beauty standards are defined by European and Western culture, the same countries that have the most power and influence. And certainly race is linked to the opinions of beauty standards. So basically, for our conclusion of beauty standards and patriarchy, we know as radical feminists, we absolutely reject beauty standards as prescribed by society. We reject the liberal feminism's freedom of choice regarding beauty standards, and we reject cultural feminism's feminine essence beauty standards. We know the roots of these standards come from the Tower of Babel. How do we know? It's global. It's in every culture. It's been around since history began. The standards may be different for each culture, but they are standards nonetheless. Video, yes. Standards of beauty are created by men and for men. Now, these beauty standards are also political, right? The personal is political. So we know from the 1989 Supreme Court case, a non-conforming woman employee sued her company for depriving her of a partnership, and she won. Now, some women have, you know, they say, well, I've never been influenced by beauty standards. And I'm like, well, that's great, but beauty standards have been used against you in ways that you may not even know, because you may not have gotten that job, you may not have gotten that raise. There are certain things that, like the airline industry, you would never have been hired if you're too tall, if you have too large of hips, if your hair wasn't the right color. A lot of it is you just don't even know. And, you know, a man might not even get up and give you his seat on a transit commute. It's just that insidious that you don't even know you're being judged and determined whether or not you meet that beauty standard. So when the women were protesting the Miss World pageant in 1970, it wasn't against the women. It was against the system. They knew it was patriarchal. They knew it was oppressing women. They knew for themselves the pressures that were put on them. And remember what they shouted? We're not beautiful. We're not ugly. We are angry. That was such a powerful chant for their protest. So they knew it was patriarchal. They knew women were being sexually objectified. Because why else at those kind of competitions do they give the actual body measurements of a woman? And I'm not, not just the height, but, bust, the waist and the hips. And then the camera zooms in on certain features of her body. So it is like a cattle market. We know this kind of discrimination continues. We know that we will make people angry because we reject this on so many levels. And because we have a personal choice, a prophetic reason, an understanding to reject the cultural beauty standards from around the world. And it will be political. And with that, I end, and I'd be glad to open this up for discussion. I'd like to hear some other opinions and experiences by our women members. I know everybody's had them. Am I still on?
Yes, you still
Oh,
are.
okay. What experiences have you had? Has anyone felt these pressures to conform?
Hi, Carrie.
I feel like I talked.
Oh.
Go ahead, Lana.
Oh, go ahead, Lana. I'll
Sorry.
go after you. Yeah.
Hi, happy Sabbath to you all. And there's so much that I can relate to, and so much that I'm guilty of. That I can't even begin to describe from where. There's just like one of those moments where we definitely, somebody who is short and chubby, I feel like I need to always diet and try to prop myself up, and a lot of things that I can relate to. And this study really kind of exposes all this stuff that has been inculcated in us, or in me particularly, and that it's just really so unnecessary. And that I, like, personally, what I'm taking out of the study is that it's really through, so this light of this third angel's message is it's like going through this prism to show us in detail and separating the different colors, right? To help us to understand how the third angel's message is translating in our lives. And one of them is for us women who are so worried and pressured to look in a certain way, or to behave in a feminine way, or speak in a feminine way, right? Or to take care of our bodies in a certain way, to conform to certain kind of, let's say, standards that are really, they're really unspoken of, but they're standards. And it's just so much that this study exposes. And it's like God speaking to us and telling us that we should change, and me particularly. So thank you so much. This is beautiful.
Amen.
Gloria?
Yes. Thank you, Kathy, for your presentation. I can relate a lot of it, especially having 4 girls. my mother-in-law always used to say, make sure they're not too tall or they won't be able to get married. My
my.
my 3 girls they're quite normal. I wouldn't say too tall, but my last girl, she's about 5'8", and they haven't seen her yet. Ever. So they'll be really shocked to see how much she's grown. But we had to nap a lot because that was our survival. And I don't know how they're gonna react, but yeah, thank you for your presentation.
Wow, thank you for sharing. Alyssa?
Yeah, there are a lot of really great nuggets. The like beauty as social currency, that I hadn't thought about it in those terms before, but and I think I was kind of seeing that there's a health aspect to these beauty standards. At least that's kind of how I grew up. I didn't have the natural physicians that those who grew up with Ellen White had, but my parents we lived pretty close to the health reforms anyway, without having direct knowledge of them. So I was seeing that there's kind of an overlap with health reform and those beauty standards, because even Ellen White poses beauty standards, but the beauty standards that are imposed aren't so much, there's a beauty outside of social norms that goes into health and optimal function and just overall better survival. We are told not to eat so much or to not eat certain things because that's best for our health. But that in turn is also anti-aging, but maybe we don't look at it as anti-aging as much as we ought to look at it as pro-aging well. So I was just kind of reconciling with, how to look at the health reforms in light of the patriarchal influences that have soaked the principles within the SDA church as well as most all churches. But the beauty as currency really struck a nerve, a chord, because especially the self-objectification where we as women, even women will say, well, I just look good for myself. Well, that's not entirely true, because that self-objectification, those standards are still imposed by society, and society is patriarchal, and it exists for the betterment of and the sustaining of men. And so I think it's disingenuous for women to say, I only look good for myself, because if we really understand the society that we're in, even self-objectification has a group dynamic to it. That's all I had, but thank you it was a really good thought exercise, I guess, in many ways, just to examine some of the
It's
concepts I've had.
Yeah, you could divide this thing into just like probably 6 different studies to go deeper, but I just want to do kind of like an overview and we know that every woman is affected in some form, some way, and it varies enough that, like Bob shared, how family members were anorexic or bulimia. We know that not everybody goes to that extreme, but it can happen, but there's still a psychological issue going on. And it's really stunning. And I think if you Google some TED Talks, they do talk about toxic beauties, chemicals and things like that are, so it's a moral, I saw it as a moral thing also, these poorer nations being taken advantage of to create these quote beauty products that then are used to create this beauty standard. And just all of it's just dirty, you know, when you think about it.
And it was even, you know, it was done way back in history when women were dying because of the color they wanted to put on their eyelids.
Yes.
Or it was still there and they were dying.
Yeah, I think it was during the French Revolution. There, remember the white faces? They had a lot of white faces at that time. Yeah. They used lead in that.
Yeah.
And the reason and they made a paste. And what was happening was the smallpox was leaving all these pot marks on their face. Now, of course, this was the wealthy. The poor weren't doing this. So the wealthy were plastering their face with this stuff to get a smooth complexion. Of course, they were getting lead poisoning. And later on in the French Revolution, there was some kind of a disruption in white flour production. Mm-hmm. And the wealthy used the white flour to powder their wigs. And they were hoarding that flour. And that was part of the women invading the city of Paris because there was no flour for bread.
And wasn't that kind of that other side to the let them eat cake, because there was a certain flour that was just for cake and a certain flour just for bread, and they're like, well, we don't have any more flour for bread, so Antoinette's like, let them eat cake.
I mean, I was looking, I mean, you could do a study of each culture, different cultures. I looked at the Chinese, the foot binding. It's actually called lotus feet.
Oh, yeah.
Little girls are taken at age 3 or 4, and their toes are folded under their soles of their feet and tightly bound. And if you look up, and you can see images of it's extremely painful. Mm-hmm. And the goal is 3-inch feet.
Yeah.
That is considered attractive by the men.
And they couldn't walk. They were crippled.
No, they toddled like a toddler.
Yeah.
And they were then constrained to only working and doing seamstress work. Mm. And another point was that they couldn't run away from their husbands. Oh. And women did this to their daughters because it actually enhanced their chances of getting married. And it's just, I mean, it was not outlawed in China until the Communist Revolution in 1949. So, I mean, it's just, you know, there's amazing, but it's so global. Mm-hmm. Women everywhere are affected by these things culturally.
Yeah, it's the women who are actually doing the female genital mutating.
Yes. Yes.
So that they will be able to get married. Yeah.
Tradition and culture.
Yep. It's just all of them. Yeah.
Very powerful.
Oh, I just wanted to mention the fairy tales and such, especially like Cinderella.
Oh, yes.
Mm-hmm. And that's a classic theme right up till now. And the ugly duckling, you know, you'll go out of it, or you could do something about it to change yourself so you will be sought after and beautiful. And then we have but then we have the other side too, like you can't make a silk purse out of a sow's ear.
Oh, wow.
And then what do you get when you put lipstick on a pig, you know?
Oh, yeah, right. Oh, my gosh. Well, Sue Ellen, when you brought up the fairy tales, Cinderella, think about that story. Small, petite, hourglass, blonde hair, blue eyes, small feet.
Yes.
And what are her stepsisters? Ugly, tall,
Yes.
big feet.
Right.
There's the message.
And even when they got dressed for the ball in their finery, they still were ugly.
Yes, yes. I mean, the message was clear.
Yeah.
It's amazing. I'm just like, your eyes, you just keep getting opened. And, I have found this very therapeutic for myself.
Oh, yeah.
To realize, things that I experienced and I didn't even know what it was. And now I do. And it's just really healing,
Mm-hmm.
big sigh. And it's, you're,
Oh, it's the
it does hold you back.
Well, this is kind of a personal, what do you call it, story or whatever. But, a lot of when women get married, okay, when they get married, they're trying to recreate that Cinderella thing, looking beautiful and all that stuff. And then they have bridesmaids and stuff, and the bridesmaids are supposed to look good, and especially in the, I think, 50s and such, maybe earlier, I don't, that they made a point apparently of trying to find somebody good looking to be your bridesmaid. Well, at my first wedding, I did the same thing. Except for I wasn't very materialistic because it was in the 60s. And so it was like, I didn't get a dress. I rented a dress because I knew I wasn't going to ever wear it again. You rented
Ellen.
dresses too. But anyway, so I had my two childhood friends be my maids of honor or whatever. I think they were both maidens, but I'm not sure now. Anyway, my sister told me later, she said, I just thought it was so nice of you to have, she named their names, to be your bridesmaids. And I didn't get it at first, but I figured it out. It was because they weren't very attractive, really. I mean, by standards, like, what? Why wouldn't I? They're my best friends.
Right. Wow.
Oh,
Anyone
A
else?
lot of this has helped me to understand so many years after the fact why I was never popular. Because I didn't care about any of this stuff. I mean, I got whistled at in my 20s by construction workers. I don't know if anybody hasn't been, but and even once somebody honked at me when I was 37. But anyway, but overall, as an entire package, I was never popular because I didn't have the kind of hair that you could do anything with. Couldn't feather it. I couldn't make it big in the 80s. And whatever women were doing in the 90s, I probably didn't do that either. And I never wore pretty shoes. I always wore these because I got big feet. I'm Scandinavian. I'm 5'8". Now I'm 5'8" now that I've had my back surgery again. But big feet. You should see my shoes because I got problems with my feet now. So I got to wear like size 11.
And comfort. We need comfort now.
Black clodhoppers. Very loose, like sweats, because since my back surgery, I don't. Anyway, but even to work, and because of menopause, t-shirt sweats. So I'm probably less popular than ever, but the last time I got a job promotion, I was 22.
Wow.
Yeah, I was, no, I mean, not in childhood, not in my teen years, not in college, not the rest of the way, never popular, because I never wore makeup, never wore jewelry. It just wasn't my thing. I was a tomboy. So I never cared. You know, it's like when I was in high school, music was my thing. And I played instruments. I was in band. And it was my goal to be first chair in every instrument I took up. And I did. You should have seen the looks people would give me.
Wow.
I'm telling you, I mean, you know, we had our burnouts and we had our, you know, straight geeky people, which I was. And you know, I'm going to be first chair, even if I have to take it away from a boy. And I did. I didn't care. I just wanted to be, you know, good at whatever I did. And I told this story to people many times over the years. My senior year, the summer of before my senior year, our best clarinet player, tenor player, graduated. This guy had talent like none of us did. Whatever he wanted to do, he could do. He graduates. The rest of the, I guess, maybe 2 clarinet players there were, they never practiced. They were terrible. All they cared about was partying. Anyway, I came back in September, you know, after I took a clarinet home that summer because I figured, you know, the band director would appreciate it. And I was tired of playing flute. I took it home over the summer. We show up in September and I'm sitting at the end of, you know, the row because, you know, I'm not, I didn't want to make waves, but anyway, I'm sitting in 3rd chair. And the band director looks at me because he knows what I was doing over the summer, even though he hasn't heard anything yet. Says, Linda, you're first chair. And oh, if I was ever so unpopular, because I didn't even challenge those people yet. You had to challenge somebody. Then you had to prove you could take their chair away from them.
Oh, wow.
I was so ambitious. And he says, Linda, you're first chair. He didn't even want to bother with formalities. You should have seen the looks. I never forgot it. I was never popular. And now, I mean, I can put a name to it. You know, it's okay if you're a guy if you do that. But I don't even know if there were any guys that did it the way I did it. I was doing stuff over and above what an ambitious guy would do. And no, people didn't know what to do with that. And I didn't feel good about the fact that I was never popular. I mean, I never understood, like, well, why should I pretend to be less than what I am? When you're 5'8", it's a little hard not to look down on other people. But why should, you know, I go out in public now, I'm taller than most men. That's what I see. But why should I try to be less than what I am? That, you know, that's not fun. And if you're doing something you really enjoy and you're able to get better than somebody else, why should you play that down? And you know, I also admired people who were smart. It didn't matter if they were male or female. Smarter than I was, or knew more than I was, knew more than I did. So yeah, a lot of the experiences that many of you may have had with, you know, giving into, and you know, we all dressed a certain way when we were younger. I mean, that was the fashion. That was why we got whistled at and gawked at, but maybe not as much as some other people, was my experience. I wasn't like naturally, oh, you know, you're a beauty queen kind of thing. Although my husband tells me the opposite many times. You don't have any self-esteem. Well, when you've been maybe called names, and when you've been looked down on or ignored for so many years because you don't look like the platinum blonde,
Mm-hmm. You can
you
see
get
the
that
effects.
message.
Yeah,
What?
you can see the effects is across the board. Whether you participate in the beauty standards or don't, you're still affected.
Yeah. If you don't participate at all,
Mm-hmm.
you just have to basically get used to being ignored.
Mm-hmm.
Or they call you names like 2x4.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't have a chest till I was like, I had a baby. You get ignored or you get called these, names,
Yeah.
and or you won't understand why people dislike you so much.
Yeah, right?
They come and say, I hate you. I go, well, why? I didn't do anything to you. You won't get it. Or, oh, how terrible it was that you took someone's like chair away from them or whatever in a musical organization.
How dare,
What?
how dare you?
Yeah. But yeah, I'm better than they are. So why shouldn't I be first? I work my butt off. Why shouldn't I be?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, but they're more popular. They're burnouts, Yeah, no, so many things didn't make sense over the years. And even my husband, who's basically a nothing, he's picking up on things. He watches things, and because he hears me talking about patriarchy, and I read the gender knot. He didn't, but I talk about these things.
Yeah.
And he'll be watching something. I forget what it was. Oh yeah, it was something about agriculture. The things that have happened. Just anything. You pick a topic. Oh, we've raped the land. We've destroyed the land using chemicals. We've, whatever. And even stuff like that, you can draw it back to patriarchy.
Yeah.
It's everything and anything. But anyway, that was my comment. I've made similar comments over time that if you don't play along, that's what you suffer. You get ignored or you get called names. No one goes out with you. No one asks you out on a date. You don't go to the prom, yada, yada, yada. But you try to compensate by finding other more interesting things in life to, pursue.
Yeah. Well, thank you.
For me, yeah.
Anyone else? Okay. Well, on that note, thank you for the sharing that you did do. I know this helped me a lot. I hope it does you too. And with that, we'll close in prayer. Dear Holy God, we thank you, Lord, for opening our eyes to setting us free from cultural standards and beauty impositions that affect us mentally, physically. We thank you for helping us to heal, to help us to rewire our brains, to continue to grow and blossom as radical feminists. We praise you and thank you in Jesus' name. Amen.
Amen.
All right, everybody. I hope everybody's still staying warm and safe.